All right. So tonight's presentation, I'm super excited to kick, it seems very seasonal, is Beer and Birds Brewery Partnerships for Conservation. So tonight we're being presented to by Steve, who's one of my coworkers. Steve Prager is Audubon Southwest outreach biologist. He's based out of Tucson and Phoenix, Arizona. Steve connects community members with conservation action opportunities, be it through bird surveys, policy action, or hands-on habitat work. His specific work includes the Western Rivers Brewers Council, which we'll hear a lot about tonight, the Western Rivers Action Network, which we'll also learn about tonight. Also our important bird areas program, our Audubon chapters, as well as our campus chapters focused on recruiting college-age kids into bird conservation. And managing the nationally recognized River Pathways program focused on inspiring teens towards careers in conservation. So basically, Steve does everything really cool in our office in Arizona. He's got lots of great stories and he's a huge birder. So he earned a Bachelor's of Science in Conservation Biology and Ecological Sustainability from Arizona State University. And when he's not looking up to find birds, he's also looking down to find snakes. So I don't think we'll see any of his snakes photography in tonight's presentation, but you could ask him about it if you want at the end. So Steve, I'm going to stop sharing and I'll let you take over from here.
Good deal. How's that look?
Looks great.
Good deal. So thank you, Katie. Thanks everyone for joining us. I plan to introduce myself during this slide, but Katie did an awesome job doing that for me. So instead, I'm just going to jump right in. If things want to work. There we go. So for anybody who is not familiar, Audubon Southwest is the regional office of the National Audubon Society. We work to protect birds and their habitats through science, education, and advocacy. And I think most importantly is that third bullet point down. We provide conservation action opportunities. We provide a way for people who care about birds and their habitats to be part of the effort in protecting them. The program I'm here to talk to you about tonight is the Western Rivers Brewers Council, which is a coalition of craft brewers that further our efforts to protect rivers and water resources across the Colorado River Basin, and now the Rio Grande as well in New Mexico, helping us with outreach, storytelling, and also being frontline advocates for policies that further the cause. Before we dive into the Brewers Council, though, I want to talk a little bit about how the coalition came to be in the first place. And so first off, why water? In Arizona and New Mexico, it's really impossible to talk about birds without talking about rivers. It's impossible to talk about rivers without talking about our water resources, and these places offer rare and disappearing habitat types that are disproportionately valuable to both wildlife and to people. Riverside habitats like the forests and wetlands that line the Colorado River support some of our most abundant and diverse bird communities in the West, serving home to some 400 species, including that snowy egret there. The Colorado also provides drinking water for more than 36 million people, irrigates 5.5 million acres of farms and ranches, supports about 16 million jobs through 7 states, and has a combined annual economic impact of almost $1.5 trillion. Saline lakes are part of this Western water system as well. These are the landlocked saltwater lakes fringed with wetlands that dot the Intermountain West. They're beacons for millions of birds crossing an otherwise arid landscape in migration during the winter and during the breeding season as well. But as water recedes due to drought, water diversions, climate change, toxic dust is being exposed at these saline lakes. And this picture here is of that at the Salton Sea. This leaves the communities around these lakes at a higher risk for asthma and other health issues. So there's kind of an equity side to these water issues as well. So in short, the future of water in the West is closely tied to the future of birds, habitats, economies, communities, people, and it's why it falls out as one of National Audubon's 5 strategic initiatives. This is not an issue that we in the West can ignore. And it's with all of this in mind that Audubon launched the Western Rivers Action Network. And this is a network of Audubon members, birders, hunters and anglers, businesses, and others that share a common goal of protecting rivers and water across the West. And they work towards this goal by motivating their respective networks to take action surrounding ongoing policy issues. The idea behind the network is that while water policy can be extremely wonky, and it can be hard to understand. It can be hard to see how issues and things that you care about are affected by any given piece of water policy. It's still something that we all have a stake in, and by working together to transform policy into something that is understandable and motivating to our membership and actionable, we can really get things moving. We take both a grassroots and a grass tops approach to the work. Grassroots are things like action alerts, monthly newsletters, webinars, online resources. The grass tops things are things like coalition letters, in-person meetings with policymakers, submitting formal on the record statements about active policy. And while the Western Rivers Action Network has a lot going for it, there has always been one kind of glaring problem. We had kind of the typical folks involved. You know, we have Audubon members, we have our chapters, we have birders, hunters, anglers, other nonprofit organization partners. But how do we reach the rest of people? Because that is just a tiny subset of folks in the West, and we all have a stake in the ongoing health of our rivers and our water resources. So how do we reach those folks? In comes beer. So we've thought about this question before, not in this context, but in the context of our other state level programs and at our center in Phoenix. And one of our most successful solutions has been our monthly Birds and Beer program. This is a happy hour style event that combines craft beer from local brewer, Arizona Wilderness Brewing Company, with a short presentation from a local conservation professional, usually mixed with some sort of call to take action. The style of the program and the fact that we can invite speakers that appeal to audiences we're hoping to engage has helped the program be successful in engaging new participants that tend to be younger and more diverse than our usual crowd. During a regular month, which we haven't seen in a while due to COVID, we can see anywhere between 60 and 120 folks at these events, about half of which are typically new to Audubon. So launching from this success and with the help of a grant from Toyota Together Green, we were able to build off this idea with the release of our very first collaborative brew, which was with Four Peaks Brewing Company. The beer was called Western Rivers Ale, and it celebrated the Western Yellow-billed Cuckoo, and kind of through the cuckoo brought people back to the Western Rivers Action Network and opportunities to sign up and get engaged. We released the beer at a launch party at the Rio Salado Audubon Center in Phoenix, and it was available for about a month at Four Peaks' 3 locations. Also at those locations were promotional materials about RAN, the cuckoo, and how to sign up and get involved. About 9,000 pints were sold during the month at the 3 locations. So between that and the event at the center, that is close to 10,000 people that connected with Audubon, opportunities to take action, and the Yellow-billed Cuckoo. And it really worked. And I think this was the proof. The Western Yellow-billed Cuckoo was featured on the front page of the Arizona Republic, both in print and online. And for a bird nerd that has been surveying for this bird for the last decade, that was pretty exciting. Usually I tell folks that I spend my summers surveying for Western Yellow-billed Cuckoo, and they kind of look at me with confused eyes. People know what the cactus wren is, people know what a cardinal is, people know what a roadrunner is, but people don't know about the cuckoo. And if you don't know about something, it's really hard to care about it. So it was working, and we started thinking about the successes, and we wanted to push things even a little bit further. And to do that, we started by identifying why things were working. And right off the bat, three things came to mind. The first is this. This is a quote from one of our brewery partners here in Phoenix, Wren House. The ethos of craft beer is community. And it's true, brewers are hubs for their local communities, and the folks that patron them tend to be more community-minded and often more sustainability-minded than the population at large. There's a reason that someone's going to go to a place like Arizona Wilderness instead of, I don't know, like their local Chili's or something. And those reasons can make folks a good fit for community-driven conservation efforts. And brewers take this role seriously. Working with breweries, the one thing that continues to impress me all the time is the amount of good that they hope to achieve for their communities through their craft. They really want their beer to benefit the communities in which they work and which they're a part of, and it really shows. The second reason working with brewers in the realm of water and conservation was this quote here. Craft brewers know that an adequate and reliable water supply is critical to their craft. And Audubon knows that it's critical to healthy communities, rivers, habitats, birds, and other wildlife. It's not just a partnership in name only. Birds need water, craft beer needs water. It's something that we can genuinely work on together. We're not just asking them for a favor. They kind of have a horse in the race, so to speak. The third reason it makes sense is this, and it may come as a surprise, but not all lawmakers, especially here in the West, are motivated by things like rivers or birds. A bigger chunk of them, though, are motivated by economic concerns, and craft brewing is a big and growing small business sector. Close to $1 billion in Arizona alone. And for this reason, brewers can advocate for the same policies that we're pushing for in a very real way, and they're more likely to actually be heard by lawmakers that we might otherwise not be able to reach. So it was with all of this reasoning in mind that we launched the Western Rivers Brewers Council. Arizona Wilderness, our birds and beer partner, was our founding member. But we knew we weren't going to get far with just them, so we set ourselves to recruitment. And today we are sitting at just over 30 members in Arizona, in New Mexico, and in Colorado. If you check out the link at the bottom there, you'll be brought to the landing page for the Brewers Council. And there you can learn a little bit more about the members, check out their websites, and find a Brewers Council member near you. Did I skip something there? No, we're good. So we're sitting at just about 30 members, but what have they been up to for the last 3 years since we launched the council? They've been taking action in a diversity of ways, and I'll jump into some of them here. The first is that they help to amplify our voice. Brewers help us reach audiences by sharing our materials and action opportunities with an audience that without them, we might have a hard time reaching. And taking a quick break from the brewers and focusing on how you can take action, I want to really quickly discuss one of these items specifically, and that is our action alerts. So when you sign up for the Western Rivers Action Network, you're going to get sent what we call action alerts, which will be an email that looks something like this. Really simple. They're going to describe an issue that we need your voice helping us either advance or push back. It's going to be an issue that affects our rivers, affects our water, affects our birds and communities. And what we'll do is we'll take that really wonky piece of policy, and our policy director will distill that down into something that makes a lot more sense in basic language that anybody can understand. And in that email, you're going to see a take action button. So what you want to do is click that. You'll be brought to a page that looks like this. You'll have a pre-populated letter kind of stating our position on the issue and encouraging your policymaker, be it your local senator, the governor, your representatives, whoever the target may be, to take our position on that issue. You'll click next. It will tell you who it is going to. For myself, that is our state senator, Rebecca Rios, my state rep, Reginald Bolding, and Diego Rodriguez. You'll click send message and you're done. It'll give you this thank you page. You'll have the opportunity to share it with folks through social media. And again, if you want to sign up to receive those, just follow that link there at the bottom. And I think Katie will share that in the chat as well. So back to the beer. The second way brewers are helping us out is by helping us tell stories that motivate advocates, earn media, and push policy. This article is from the Arizona Republic, and I think it's a really good example of this. It highlights one of our collaborative brewing projects, which was an IPA named Rain Crow IPA that was put out by Borderlands Brewing Company, Crooked Tooth Brewing Company, both from Tucson, as well as Wren House Brewing Company up here in Phoenix. And we used this beer as a chance to get a piece of legislation known as, I guess, a package of legislation known as the Drought Contingency Plan, or DCP, into the news at a really critical time. The DCP, put as simply as I can, was a multi-state package of bills that put into law who would take cuts to water delivery and when, as a result of level declines in our major reservoir, Lake Mead. Settling on an agreement about this, as you can imagine, took many years, and it was often extremely contentious. We're talking about folks voluntarily giving up some of their water. Reporting often focused on the ongoing fights. It focused on human uses of water like agriculture, development, industry, and it really had a doom and gloom outlook on the West's water future. We wanted to tell a different story, one that focused on a collaborative approach to finding solutions, and one that emphasized the non-human reasons why we need to protect our water resources, things like riverside habitat and the Western Yellow-billed Cuckoo. And this brew helped us do just that and get this story and this bird into the media at a time when it was really hard to wedge anything into the media. The third way brewers are helping us take action is by helping recruit volunteers. So this is a sign-up form for one of our Downtown Owls work days, during which volunteers help us build artificial burrowing owl burrows and relocate owls that have been displaced through development. As you can probably imagine, COVID put us in a hard spot with this project. A year spent unable to facilitate work days meant a huge backlog of burrowing owls being held at our avian rehab partners' aviaries. We had to get the owls on the ground, and we had to do so safely. So we had to do it through many tiny work days instead of just a handful of large work days, which would have been our normal approach. And our challenge was, how do we motivate folks that we haven't really reached out to in close to a year, and motivate them to volunteer at a time when, due to COVID, we can't get in front of them? The solution, of course, is more collaborative brews. So this was the first of two released in fall of 2020, and we called it U9 Lager, named after a particularly charismatic little relocated burrowing owl who sports a green leg band with the identifying code U9. And if you look on that label, you'll see on the bottom left there, just above Wild at Heart's logo, a bit.ly link. And that is the link that brought folks to the sign up page. The following spring, we released U9's sequel, Blondie IPA, and this brew celebrated another owl. This time it was a wild owl who found one of our artificial burrow sites and set up shop with U9. And just as was true for U9 Lager, the label included a link through which folks could sign up and volunteer. This one came out, this was a partnership with Wren House Brewing Company, and it earned us just a little bit over 60 new volunteers for the project, which is really what we needed to get it done this year. Another example of a brew aimed at volunteer recruitment was Summer on the Salt IPA, brewed collaboratively by Oso, Oro, and Pedal House Brewing Companies. This brew, which was released at all 3 breweries, we didn't put this one in a can, was used as a recruitment tool to engage volunteers with restoration efforts underway on the Lower Salt River, which is just outside of Phoenix. It's within the Salt Verde riparian ecosystem important bird area. And it, along with the river above it, is the densest nesting site in the state for our desert nesting bald eagles. And what we're seeing at that site, because of water management and drought, is a loss of the cottonwood canopy that these eagles nest in, and the replacement of that with a lot of salt cedar or tamarisk, which is an invasive tree that doesn't have the same value to wildlife as our native trees do. A couple of years ago, there was a big fire through the area that torched several hundred acres of that tamarisk forest, and that was an opportunity for us to come in, clear some of the burnt material, and replant with native species. So we needed a lot of volunteers to get that work done, and this beer helped us get a hold of them. After the workday out on the river, we met up with partners, volunteers, and the public at Oso Brewing Company. Not only did this allow us to kind of show our volunteers a good time and remind them that we appreciate all of the hard work that they put forth for us, but it also helped us reach hundreds of people with a pretty compelling story about community conservation. People that were really just stopping by the brewery for lunch and weren't expecting to be greeted with Audubon birds or conservation opportunities. Brewers are also helping us out through on-the-ground efforts on their own property. These signs are from an installation at Arizona Wilderness Brewing Company's downtown Phoenix beer garden, where their staff helped us install Arizona's first bird-friendly beer garden. This garden provides habitat for hummingbirds and other pollinators, and it is right in the kind of urban core of downtown Phoenix. The garden and the signs also help us direct folks to resources that will help them create similar habitat in their own outdoor spaces. And it also fits into our broader Plants for Birds program, which aims to transform human spaces into resources for birds and wildlife through the use of native plants. So through those signs, folks can both get onto the Western Rivers Action Network or check out our Plants for Birds database, where they'll learn about what sort of plants work for what sort of birds where they live. The brew that gave us the idea for this garden was Hummingbird Springs Saison. It was our first Brewers Council branded can, and it's one that comes out every year, typically in celebration of International Migratory Bird Day in spring, but due to the pandemic, we're gonna push this one out into the fall. So expect to see that one soon. Stepping away from the brewery a little bit, brewers are also taking direct policy action in person. This here shows a couple of our brewery partners from Wilderness meeting with Representative TJ Shope in Arizona. These meetings, they're great. They really stand out. Usually when you go and you meet with a senator, everybody is kind of like buttoned up. There's kind of a typical person you expect to see in that meeting. To be frank about it, it's a bunch of old dudes in suits. So when you have someone like the Wilderness crew come in with a flannel shirt and a big beard, and they still kind of smell like the brewery, and they're talking about all the same water issues that we are, these are meetings that our representatives remember. They stand out from the endless list of meetings that they have on any given day. Brewers are also taking direct policy action in writing, and this is an example of one of our Brewers Council coalition letters. In this case, the letter thanks Governor Ducey of Arizona and the director of our Arizona Water Department for their signing of Minute 323, which was a piece of legislation that sort of served as a precursor to the drought contingency plan I was talking about a minute ago, and ongoing work to balance supply and demand across the watershed. So why the Brewers Council has worked. I really think there's just a handful of things. One is that it gives the brewers an access to the Audubon network. We have a lot of folks that follow us, And our lists don't necessarily overlap with the breweries. So just as they can help bring new folks to us, we can help bring new folks through their door. And this was especially valuable over the last year. Brewers really had a hard time keeping their businesses running through COVID, and being able to give some publicity to them in a really positive way during a hard time was very appreciated. We're also able to pull together some media attention. These collaborative brews tend to be fun stories that reporters want to talk about. So we're able to get the brewers kind of in the limelight a little bit. And then that one in bold there, I think, is probably the most important. And then we provide real opportunities to take action. We're not just going in there and asking for them to donate money. We're going in there and we're asking them for their voice, for their voice as community hubs and organizers, and for their voice as a small business community. And that voice is something that's really valuable that we can't recreate on our own. And I think they know that and they appreciate those opportunities. Things that resonated, which is a real connection to the mission. They care about water. They understand that without clean, reliable water, they are out of luck on the business front, on the beer front. Our ask is different and unique. You would be probably not surprised, but it's amazing how many folks hit up craft breweries to donate either beer for an event or money for a cause. And we're asking for neither of those. Again, we're asking for their voice, and I think they appreciate that. We offer a diversity of action opportunities. You know, some brewers might have staff that doesn't need to be at the brewery all the time that can attend in-person events. Others might not. Some might have space at their brewery for a garden. Some might be in a much smaller space that can't support it. Some brewers can their beer, some don't. So having a diversity of ways to take action ensures that every brewery of any size will have some way to give back. And then again, in bold, I think the most important one is a shared desire to benefit the communities in which we work. That is something that Audubon definitely strives to do, and it's something that the brewery community strives to do as well. So some stuff to look forward to. Something that's ongoing is recruitment in New Mexico. We recently brought on Bosque Brewing Company and Red River Brewing Company as our first two New Mexico brewers. So keep an eye out for them. We will be working together on some projects in the future, both on the policy front and then hopefully on the collaborative beer front as well. August, September here in Arizona, there is going to be a reboot of Rain Crow IPA. This will be the third release of that beer so far, and we're expecting that to drop in either August or September of this year. And then in fall of this year, up in Phoenix, Hummingbird Spring Saison Sour will again be released at Arizona Wilderness Brewing Company, and we hope to couple that release with a plant sale and a garden work day to rejuvenate the bird-friendly beer garden that we installed this year. So some cool stuff on the horizon. I think our kind of concrete projects right now are in Phoenix, but as we recruit in New Mexico, I'm excited to build some stuff over there as well. So I recommend you follow us on both sides. That first link there will bring you to the landing page for the Brewers Council, where you can check out some of the things that we've done, some of our past projects, and you can see our members list so you can find a Brewers Council member near you. And then if you want to join the brewers in their work protecting rivers and water across the West, you can follow that bottom link, and that will bring you to the sign up page where you can join the Western Rivers Action Network. Our social media is below that. My contact information is to the right. And then other than photo credits, that's all I've got for you guys.
Thanks so much, Steve. That was awesome. I love this story so much. And I think it's just like such a great collaboration between folks that don't traditionally work together. So birders and brewers.
Yep.
Yeah, it's awesome. Plus, who doesn't love a good microbrew. I've got some Bosque beer in my fridge that I think is gonna probably come out after this. Um,
Yeah,
so if you wanna just take a breath and get a sip of water, we have some questions coming in.
cool.
So if anyone has questions for Steve, feel free to drop them in the chat. And while we're waiting for those to come in, I will just do another quick plug. I did put in the RAN sign up as well as our brewer sign up. Here's also I've just put in the chat our Audubon Southwest newsletter, which is a great way to stay in contact as well. We have a lot of overlap between those lists and those contacts and communications. And I will just do a really quick plug. We are a nonprofit who works across 2 states with like 20 people for 2 very large Western states. So if you do feel inspired and want to help support Steve and his work, as well as our work across Arizona and New Mexico, we do appreciate any sorts of donations that you're able to make to help support the work. And it does go directly to our programs here in Arizona and New Mexico. All right, so it looks like we do have some questions that have come in. I'm gonna give you an easy lowball one to start with, Steve. What's your favorite beer and your favorite bird?
Okay. They're not as easy as you might think. I have a hard time picking favorites. Favorite beer, I go back and forth between IPAs and sours. As you can probably tell by the collaborations, they're mostly IPAs and sours, and there's a reason for that. My favorite bird, I go back and forth, but it's probably the Western Yellow-billed Cuckoo. This bird it's emblematic of rivers in the Southwest, which is a habitat type that I am deeply passionate about. And it's a bird that, I've surveyed it for the last 11 years of my career, and my career is only, I graduated in 2006 from college, so, or 2010 rather. So I only have, it's like the whole thing, like I've been surveying for this cuckoo from day one, and I owe it a lot of what I have now.
Steve, we got a question in the chat during your presentation, but could you give like a very short overview of why the cuckoo is like an important bird in the Southwest and like why there's surveys and all of that going on around it?
Absolutely. So the Western Yellow-billed Cuckoo is a subset of the Yellow-billed Cuckoo, which exists in the East as well, and its populations have declined precipitously in the recent decades, mostly as a result of water management and diversions, things like dams pulling water out of our river systems into more managed systems, the resulting loss of our riparian forest, and they're important because they're a flagship species. They depend on this riparian habitat, and riparian habitat is just so disproportionately valuable in the West. It is home to about 2/3 of our threatened and endangered vertebrate species in the West. If you're going to focus on like one chunk of habitat to pay attention to make a big difference, riparian habitat is probably it, with maybe grasslands as the number 2. So it's important in its own right. They call it the rain crow because it tends to call before our summer monsoon storms. And if you can just get that image in your head of like the monsoon clouds rolling in over this desert river, with the cuckoos calling, like it's just such a Southwestern scene. Like they're branded really, really well. And so many other birds depend on that same habitat. So if we can protect the cuckoo, we can protect a whole heck of a lot.
Great. I love how excited you get about cuckoos, Steve.
I love the cuckoo. It's a good bird.
Yeah, and I think that translates kind of across our work, right? Is like birds are this great bioindicator of like, if we're protecting them, we're probably protecting huge swaths of habitat, and what's good for them is good for pretty much all of us humans included. So
Absolutely, and they're that indicator. So you see the decline in the cuckoo, something is wrong with our river systems at large. They're not the only ones suffering.
Totally. Cool. So what's kind of coming down the pipeline or the river? You know, are there more beer-friendly gardens coming up? I know it's hard to plan with COVID. Are there more? I know you mentioned that there's some brews coming this fall.
Yeah.
Anything maybe next year on the horizon?
Yeah, there's definitely things on the horizon. There are those two beers that I mentioned, Rain Crow IPA and uh,
The hummingbird?
I think of it, the Hummingbird Springs Saison with Arizona Wilderness will be coming out. Um, we are hopeful to be successful with recruiting in New Mexico, and I have my eyes on a beer that's going to celebrate the Rio Grande. So fingers crossed for that, and I will of course keep everyone posted. Um, Anything else? Bird-friendly beer gardens, definitely. You know, we had the benefit of having kind of a big space at Arizona Wilderness, and the garden's going to be awesome after working on it for a little while. But we also want to remind folks that you don't necessarily need like a big backyard to benefit birds. And there are a couple of breweries that have smaller spaces that I am actively working on convincing to do gardens at their space. One of them just has this like, it's in this little kind of industrial area, and they use to separate their like patio and their eating space outside these big old whiskey barrels. And I really want to do native plant kind of potted gardens in the whiskey barrels. You know, I live in an apartment, so I just have a patio. I can't recreate what we did in Wilderness at home, but I could create a pretty sweet potted garden, and you put enough of those together and we can really help birds with those little pieces as well. So more things on that front to come as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it'd be awesome to do that connection between like native plants and plants for birds and also kind of those gardens and those breweries. You don't have to have a huge yard, and many of us
No.
don't have yards at all in the Southwest. So yeah, all about the container gardens. Yeah. Yeah, right, Laura? She's saying potted native plant garden for small spaces. I'll suggest that to Kathy. Maybe that'll be our fall webinar. Um, thanks for, oh, Kathy's on here. Great. Yeah, Elaine was asking, do any of the percentage of the beer sales go towards conservation initiatives? Have you ever had that partnership with a brewery?
Sometimes, but infrequently. So every now and then we'll do one of these collaborations, and the brewers just like don't feel good about not giving us a donation with the project. And we, of course, accept it with great gratitude. But I specifically don't ask for that. As I mentioned, you would be amazed at the number of people that come to craft breweries asking them for donations, and they are often just such small shops with such narrow bottom lines, and asking for funding can close a door. And these folks, when it comes to like conservation impact, the like maybe $1,200 they could give us off the top of a collaborative brew would go a little ways, but their voice as conservation advocates goes so much further. So I try not to specifically ask for funding and close the door to having them involved in kind of a bigger way. So sometimes, but it's not the goal.
Cool. Great. Um, there's a couple questions about Albuquerque brewers, which I don't know if you know. Do you know if there are any bird-themed breweries in Albuquerque, or if anyone has bird-friendly beer gardens in Albuquerque yet?
Not yet. So I think the Bosque Brewing Company has a location in Albuquerque, I think.
Mhm.
So they will, if all goes well, have some cool stuff going on in their space. I haven't started that conversation with them yet. So if anyone from Bosque is on the line, bird-friendly beer gardens could bring some folks to your space, and we should talk about it. But like I said, we're actively recruiting in New Mexico, and I have a good sense of the brewing scene here in Arizona. I don't have as good of a sense of it in New Mexico, so I need to do some exploration and as to who the players are, and if anybody on the line has any suggestions of brewers that you think would be a good fit, that care about their communities, care about the environment, send brewer names my way, and that'll be really useful for me as I reach out and get some more members out there.
Yeah, for sure. It sounds like you need to do maybe a research tour,
I
Steve,
really
do
do.
some field work for
Yep.
this project. Yeah, and Elaine is saying like even down in Las Cruces, which we haven't reached out to yet, but they have a great chapter down there. They've got a bunch of brew pubs down there too, and they're on the Rio Grande, sort of. Yes, they are, but not a lot of water most times. So great. Do more folks have questions? Let's see, I'm gonna go through the chat. Diane has a technical bird question. Does the yellow-billed cuckoo call sound like the Western yellow-billed cuckoo?
Yeah, it does. I actually just came back from vacation a couple weeks ago in New York, and the yellow-billed cuckoos have already arrived over there, and they're much more prevalent. So I got to hear a whole bunch of them recently, and they sound just like they do out here.
Huh. That's interesting because some birds have geographic differences in their calls, but I guess some cuckoos don't.
Yeah, they seem pretty spot on. They make a bunch of different calls, so they're real varied already. But yeah, they sound about the same.
Yeah, and that's where their name rain crow comes from, correct?
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's that loud knocking call they do before the summer storms.
More cuckoo questions. Are they in Hasayampa now or in Tucson?
I'm not sure about specific sites, but they have started to arrive in Arizona already. They came in seemingly a couple weeks early this year. Usually they are here beginning of June, but this year they were here kind of mid to late May. So they are about anywhere that you have really nice cottonwood willow riparian forest, or in places in southeastern Arizona where you have nice oak woodlands. They should be either there or showing up soon.
Cool. Can you see cuckoos along the Salt River area?
I bet you can. Yeah, the habitat there isn't great throughout the most of it, but they would absolutely use it as a migration path. So yeah, definitely.
Cool. I clearly need to learn a lot more about cuckoos, but
We've got you covered.
yeah, that's true. You do know a lot about that. It looks like in the chat there's a lot of suggestions of some cool things. I do see you sending an email, Steve, up on your screen.
Oh, I am copying and pasting the chat.
Oh, okay.
I want
Cool.
all the suggestions.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
And I just saw bow and arrow and lacumbre pop up, and I don't want to forget about
that. Those are both great. And Steve's email is on the screen, and I can put that in the chat if you have personal connections with any of those breweries. Those are really great ways to support Steve's work as well, because it's always helpful to have a friend to introduce you rather than just like cold calling a small business when they're still kind of in the middle of a pandemic. So, so those are all super great. Let's see. Anyone else have questions in the chat? You can ask Steve about beer or birds or even snakes, I guess.
Easy crowd.
Yeah, I think they're just happy for the work and happy for the beer. Okay, so Mars would like to learn more about the bald eagles projects that you did and the cottonwood project that you mentioned earlier. Is there a way to learn more about that?
I could talk to it a little bit. I don't think we have anything we could really send out, but the Salt River is really the lifeblood of Phoenix. We get about 60 to 70% of our water from the Salt and Verde River watershed. And because of that, the lower Salt River close to town has some pretty serious diversions, the last of which diverts 100% of the water of that watershed into our canal system to water the city, essentially. That has resulted in a loss of kind of like the dynamic stream processes that scour out old habitat, old trees, and create the conditions where new cottonwood and willow can grow. So over the years, we have these like couple of really big cottonwoods that are still there, that are holding out, that eagles nest in, and we're not seeing the recruitment of young cottonwood and willow coming up. So we're worried that, you go out 30 years into the future, those big cottonwood trees have since perished, and we don't have anything coming up in its place. So the restoration work that we're doing there, there's still water, there's still a good water table. So we're doing plantings of seedlings. We can't get seeds to establish, but we can put seedlings in the ground that do pretty well. And the hope is that by planting now, by the time we lose those big cottonwood trees, there will be new big cottonwood trees in their place. So it'll be an ongoing effort, since I don't think we're getting rid of that dam anytime soon. That's just like not a thing that's on the table. But through community involvement, we'll be able to continually improve that habitat and keep it going for those birds. And we're grateful to the brewers for helping us tell that story and get people out there to help.
Yeah, and that's an ongoing project, correct? Like that wasn't just a one-off sort of thing. Like
No, it wasn't. We
yeah.
actually, I think we just scheduled our next workday today. We'll be getting people out there at the beginning of December. So we'll announce a little bit more about that and a couple of beer related connections to it as well in the coming weeks.
Great. And we did just have a couple of questions about restoration days. And now that we're kind of a little bit safer in the pandemic, I think, with vaccination rates, we're definitely starting to reschedule those. So if you stay connected, you'll be first on the list to sign up for those. It's a good initiative. Good motivation.
Indeed.
Yeah. Do you know where that those projects might take place? Any ideas?
Salt River one will be in the same site, so that's just outside of Mesa along the lower Salt River. People from Arizona will know where that is. And then I think I saw Kathy on the line. She is our community science coordinator, and she's always thinking about similar type projects that we can launch in New Mexico, where you are, and you're also in the lead on a handful of those as well. So you could probably speak to those with a little bit more expertise than I could out here in Arizona, but we will have restoration and engagement projects on both sides of the White Mountains, I guess is a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's exciting that we can start bringing people together outside again. Oh, and Kathy just put her email in the chat, so if you're interested in learning more or having questions specifically, she's definitely our community science queen to reach out to for specifics. But like I said, we publish all of those online, so that you can always sign up to make sure you get all the details. Let's see, Asher had a question about when and where you can find golden eagles.
Oh, yeah, that's a fun question. I've been looking for my partner hasn't seen a golden eagle yet. She's been in Arizona for like a year and a half now. It's hard to figure out. They like, during the breeding season, anywhere you have really rugged cliffs, adjacent, really open habitat, could be anything from pinyon juniper to chaparral, grassland, sparse desert. You'll see them there because they're breeding up on the cliffs, and then they forage out over that more open habitat. During winter and migration, they can turn up just about anywhere. They range extreme distances during their winter and migration months. But they are, your guess is as good as mine, I think, because I have failed for 18 consecutive months to find a golden eagle.
Yeah, and I guess I should clarify, Asher did add that he's they're in New Mexico, which you might not know, but I know of I haven't confirmed, but I've heard that the monastery out past Abiquiu, who also brew, but that area is apparently very good for seeing golden eagles in northern New Mexico. But that's just like birder rumors. So Asher, if you want to check it out and report back, you can let us know. You can also check out eBird. That's a really great way to see recent sightings, is look on eBird and search golden eagles in a certain area, if that's more relevant. If you're in the southern part of the state, I don't know if you want to drive all the way up to Abiquiu for that. So, all right. Well, does anybody else have any questions for Steve? Otherwise, thanks all for joining us. I hope you guys are inspired, get involved, to go out and support your local breweries, and to learn more and love some birds. So thank you so much to everyone. We hope we see you in a month for our next Plants for Birds webinar. So that should be a really fun one with Kathy. And have a great evening, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.